Welcome to Power Summit 2023.
Now, this session highlights the hard work carried out by the South Asia Forum on Energy Investment and real outcomes on how funds can be mobilized for developing energy projects. I'd like to invite on stage the session chair, Mr. Sushil Bhatta, Chief Executive Officer of Investment Board of Nepal. May I please also invite on stage our moderator, Ms. Monali Zia Hazra, Regional and Clean Energy Specialist, USAID India. We'd like to invite our session chair, Mr. Sushil Bhatta, Chief Executive Officer, CEO, Investment Board of Nepal. Our moderator, Ms. Monali Zia Hazra, Regional and Clean Energy Specialist, USAID India. This theme presentation presenter, Mr. Rajiv Ratna Panda, Power Market Specialist, USAID's SAREP. I'd also like to invite Mr. Arjun Kumar Gautam, CEO, Hydroelectricity Investment and Development Company Limited. We'd also like to invite on stage Mr. Ujjwal Deep Dahal, CEO, Druk Holding and Investments Limited on stage. May I please invite on stage Mr. Tariq A. Karim, Director, Center for Bay of Bengal Studies, Independent University, Bangladesh. We'd also like to invite Mr. Deepak Amitabh, CEO, Energy Sales, Adani Power Limited, India, on stage as a panelist for this second session. May I please invite Ms. Victoria Delman, Upstream and Advisory Manager, Infrastructure, IFC. I'd also like to invite Mr. Nitin Sabiki, Head, Strategy and Markets, Renew Power Limited, India. We're setting the stage for our second session here at Power Summit 2023, which is all about the opportunities and challenges for mobilizing investment in regional energy projects in South Asia and institutionalizing the South Asia Forum on Energy Investment.
It's a pleasure for me to, really welcome you for this session, second session in the IPAN Power Summit 2023. The focus of this session, as the MC just mentioned, is the opportunities and challenges for mobilizing investments in regional energy projects in South Asia and institutionalizing the South Asia Forum on Energy Investments, SAFEI. So let me first, quickly give you a brief on how we plan to conduct this session. We will start with, the chairperson, Mr. Sushil Bhatta, giving an opening remarks, followed by a presentation, a short presentation on the SAFEI. And then we will have a moderated discussion where we will conduct 2 rounds. And if time permits, maybe more. We plan to also take up a few questions from the audience, and then, finally, we will hand it back over to our chair in order to give his concluding remarks. So with that, let me quickly, introduce our chair, who is a well-known figure in Nepal and certainly doesn't need any introduction. But Mr. Sushil Bhatta is the CEO of the Investment Board of Nepal and is an engineer in electrical and electronics with MBA. He has rich experience in leading both public and private sector organizations with a passion for delivery. With over 19 years of professional experience in diverse sectors, including the banking sector, he has a consistent and proven track record as a result-driven professional. So with that, let me quickly invite our chair to please give some opening remarks. Sure, sir.
Thank you, moderator, distinguished panelists, guests, participants, and friends from media. Very good morning, namaste. First of all, I, on behalf of Investment Board and on behalf of Office of the Investment Board and my personal behalf, would like to congratulate IPAN, Independent Power Producers, Nepal, for organizing the 8th series of Power Summit with successful completion of inaugural session. And I also would like to congratulate USAID, SAFEI, and IRADE for e-launching of the report on institutionalizing the South Asia Forum on Energy Investment. Well, we do all know the forum, conferences, workshops, seminars are very important. But the takeaways of such deliberations or discussions that are taken place, the good, noble advices, and should be regarded as a good policy inputs for streamlining, not just limit to formulating good policies, but has to have an adherence between policy, legal, regulatory, and procedural regime. And compared to other sector, I always have been claiming, and I would want to reiterate today also, amongst other sector, energy sector has been able to achieve clarity, and with the very prevalence of required instruments, tools, templates, I guess we have achieved to this level. I'm not going to go to the figures, but the path is bright. We have ample prospects, and on which the distinguished panelist in the former session also has given a clear picture. And I really cherish that these deliberations of distinguished members of the panel, I believe the brainstorming will give us a good takeaway for us to create platforms or forum wherein we can have an appropriate platform for exchange of ideas, and even for showcasing, demonstrating the good works we have done, and for showcasing the project wherein we have prospects. So we'll be delving on those details later on today, but we have something to celebrate for the efforts and achievements for the energy sector development in South Asia. However, grand outcome is yet to come. And I appreciate USAID's long-lasting efforts to realize development of clean, green, and renewable electricity in South Asia through South Asia Regional Initiative for Energy Integration. The initiatives further fortified as South Asia Regional Energy Partnership, which envisions improving access to affordable, secure, reliable, and sustainable energy in 6 countries of the South Asia region, namely Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Sri Lanka, to strengthen systems and processes in line with the economic and energy security priorities of the these countries. And while talking about opportunities and challenge, which is the basic theme of today's interesting session, for mobilizing investment, which is for regional energy projects, we must look into a structural scenario of regional integration. South Asia remains the most unintegrated region till now, where intra-regional trade and FDI is minimal. Literature shows that regional trade and investment contribution is less than 5% in total trade and investment. And however, with current growth, trend, and future development scenarios, this region can be in top ranking position in the world in terms of trade and investment, including economic growth, shared prosperity. Given the scenario, efforts to integrate the region are accelerated by different regional, sub-regional, and bilateral forums, on which we have been also hearing good news that recent Mount Abu Joint Steering Committee meeting has also charted out an action plan in relation to building cross-border transmission lines. And there are many others also. And we must acknowledge that progress is made to some extent toward this direction in developing clean, renewable, and sustainable energy trading at the bilateral levels. Well, though we have an access to exchange market, and we did even mention that the short-term tie-up or day-ahead energy trade bidding is taking place, but I would want to express to this August gathering that we have engaged or we are involved with our valued partners, that is investors, in developing some transformative hydroelectric project where we are trying best to see if, long-term tie-up for those energy which we do not require to consume, which has been actually done by evidence-based study where we undertook 7 to 8 months on the energy balance. And to see, at that point of time, looking into the plant profile or energy profile, whatever will be the scenario, whether we will be able to absorb, consume the free energy that we are getting from our valued investor in Nepalese market, or are we going to request the developer to avail us an access for long-term tie-up? Because these returns are very important. When we are talking of projects, when we are talking of benefit, the benefit is to the larger mass. The livelihood of the people has to be uplifted. So we are in a very situation, this could be a good corporate social responsibility also, and not just limiting to free, some sort of benefit we get through energy or capacity royalty, but through free energy that is coming in will eventually help us enhance our investment appetite on areas of other priorities for local people. So, for example, if you take stock of experience of energy trading with its neighbor, like for example, India or Bangladesh and Bhutan, that could be instrumental in setting up avenues for power trade through regional energy grid. And the 2030 agenda has envisioned sustainable energy for all, and South Asia can achieve this goal by investing in clean, green and renewable source of energy and efficient trading arrangement from generation site to the market. Unlike trade in goods, energy trade has less barrier after reaching into consensus to enforce regulatory frameworks, which has already been mentioned. It is very important that there has to be harmony amongst all institutions across the border involved in facilitating trade. So trade will happen, but to propel trade or to propel economy, investment is the dire need of an hour. And we have clearly, I recall you to the first session where Right Honorable Prime Minister, who is also chair of investment board, has also mentioned the need of investment that is there, and we would do best to leverage private investment by properly managing and developing PPP projects. And unlike the matter that I have mentioned, I believe these arrangements will certainly proliferate investment opportunities. And the good news I want to share you, just last week, that was on 30th of April, the board meeting that took place had approved around 1.1 billion of FDI or investments. That was FDI. In total, there were 5 projects, one very project with 669 megawatt installed capacity. We are trying best to push that project. Push means effectively handhold that project and take it to the construction regime when the real groundbreaking will happen, and the commitment that is made by the genuine potential serious developer, the commitment starts realizing. So investment board, distinguished guest panelists and participants, I would just want to take the very leverage of being in this forum today. Allow me to briefly share about investment board and that it has been doing to streamline PPP energy sector projects. We are mandated to function as PPP nodal agency, and we do act as an investment promotion agency as well to provide fast-track services for project investment worth rupees 6 billion, that is around 51 million US dollar, including implementation of energy projects above 200 megawatt. So energy, when we say hydropower and other energy projects, means solar also comes into picture. And IBN was established as a high-powered agency chaired by Right Honorable Prime Minister by IBN Act 2011, and is further empowered and mandated to function as PPP and investment agency through enactment of Public-Private Partnership and Investment Act 2019, and also the regulation that was promulgated and has come into operationalization since 2020. And large energy projects, namely flagship project, I'll have to mention 900 megawatt of Arun 3 project is last leg of completion. The generation side, the overall physical progress stands around 65%, and the evacuation arrangement has been made by a transmission, extra high voltage transmission line, 400 kV, which is of cross-border nature. It will evacuate 900 megawatt project, and we will work out with developer to evacuate our surplus energy also, because Dhalke, Bar, Muzaffarpur is already in congestion. Though there are many other projects was mentioned by utility chief and energy secretary earlier in the session, are in planning regime. Some are, we are trying best to push into construction regime on commercial terms. Those will go on because we already have precedences and practice and know-how, and those good utilities will joint venture, and that's again a very good demonstration effect of PPP modality, that extra high voltage transmission line of cross-border nature has taken place. Pooling stations and nearing substations, evacuation corridors are also in, because our act is something that has been endorsed by lawmakers, and we got to adhere by the rule. And to boost the morale and confidence of the investor, it is important that we are with them throughout the business life cycle or throughout the project life cycle. It's not just we complete the project. There is a phase when this project has to have a smooth operation also, not just entry, operations and good exit. So that is where we will build in our capacities. So these are how we are moving forward. To cut short, I would just want to say around 4,000 projects of energy are in result-based framework. IBN has structured these projects. We'll be able to give you tentative timelines when these projects would be realized. And these evidences are very important, and we got to be realistic in planning ourselves and ensure that, you know, the institution is also robust and functional to facilitate our genuine investor. Investors are our bread and butter. Hats off to EPAN. You know, in Nepalese power system, the contribution that the private developer holds stands around 51%, is what I have heard from the secondary sources. But we do value evidences. We do reach out to all our concerned, you know, policy makers. That is, IBM does make policies, but sectoral policies, we reach out to concerned line agencies and implementation agencies and try to dig out what evidences are there pertaining to market scenario. But lastly, without saying much, what I would want to say is I look forward to have excellent presentations from our distinguished panelists. And moderator, I assure you the closing will be where I'd be consuming minimal time. Time is very important. And I'm happy to be with you all here. And thank you, Ipan, for inviting me as a chair of this session.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, and I appreciate your commitment in keeping the closing session. So we have a very, distinguished panel with us, and what I'll do is quickly introduce them. I know that we are running a bit short on time, so a very brief introduction before we launch into our, theme presentation. We have with us Mr. Deepak Amitabh, who was also in the earlier session. So it helps to give a very brief introduction to him. Mr. Amitabh is well known. He was the CMD for PTC and also instrumental in setting the India's first electricity exchange, and he is currently the CEO of the energy sales in Adani Group. We also have with us Victoria Delma, who is the Manager Upstream and Advisory Asia Infrastructure at IFC. Prior to IFC, Victoria was with World Bank Group for more than 14 years as Senior Counsel. So good to have you, Victoria, and have some gender diversity here. We also have Nitin Sabhiki, who is a professional with over 16 years of experience. Currently, he's the VP and head of Renew Power. He was also founding member of IEX. Prior to that, he was also worked with Tata Power and CRM Services. Good to have you, Nitin. On my right, we have Mr. Ujjal Deep Dahal, Chief Executive Officer, Drug Holding and Investment. Ujjal, I'm so sorry. Ujjal is a Fulbright Humphrey Fellow from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Cambridge. And he started his professional career in 2002 with Bhutan Power Corporation Limited, which is the public electricity utility in Bhutan. He has a lot of, outstanding qualification. I won't go into detail, but glad to have you, Ujjal, with us. We also have with us Ambassador Tariq Ahmed Karim, who is a Bangladesh diplomat and former ambassador to the United States. Ambassador Karim, the director of the Center for Bay of Bengal Studies at the Independent University, is currently the director of the Center for Bay of Bengal Studies and Independent University, Bangladesh. And he formerly also acted as an advisor to World Bank for Regional Integration. So glad to have you, and thank you so much for joining us. I also have with us Mr. Ajay Gautam. I'm sorry, I'm going a little here and there with my papers. I seem to have missed. So Mr. Ajay Kumar Gautam is the Chief Executive Officer of HIDCL, and I'll keep it very short, but again, a very well-known figure in the Nepal Electricity Authority, in the Nepal energy stakeholder. And we'll look forward to hearing from you, sir. Again, thank you so much for joining with us. USAID is also looking forward to engaging HIDCL as a part of our SARA program. So with that, let me quickly ask my colleague, Rajiv Ratna Panda, who is the Senior Power Market Specialist at SARA for South Asia Regional Energy Partnership, to make a presentation. If, Rajiv, you can keep it to 10 minutes, sure, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Monali. I will try to stick with the timeline. And some of the points I wanted to make is also made by some of the speakers. So on those points, probably I'll try to, rush through. So what we'll do, we'll cover the presentation in following fashion. A brief idea of the South Asia. What are some of the investment needs that we see in South Asia? What is the approach and strategy paper of the SAFEI, which was released in the morning? And also a little bit about the key learnings of the international experiences, how some of the institution has been formed to mobilize regional investments. Very briefly, the institutional framework of SAFEI, its vision, mission, objective, membership, and what kind of funding modalities, and a little bit of way forward. In terms of context, I think we all know that South Asia is one of the fastest growing region in the world. I would even say that it is the fastest growing region in the world, because if we see over the years that South Asia almost managed to be one of the leading economic growth region in the world, despite economic crisis and COVID pandemic and so on and so forth. But the per capita consumption is continued to be significantly lower as compared to many other regions in the world. But at the same time, it is one of the least integrated region in the world. Hardly trade, interregional trade happens inside South Asia, roughly around 6%. Whereas if you see about other regions, they are pretty high in terms of the intra-regional trade. So there is a scope for deepening of integration, and here the energy sector can play a defining role in actually integrating the South Asia in terms of enhancing the intra-regional trade in the region. If we look at the total installed capacity of South Asia region and the peak demand, we see around 489 gigawatts of installed capacity, whereas the peak demand is something around 264 gigawatts. And if you look at the projections, possibly by 2040, the peak demand requirements could be something around 741 gigawatts. These are really huge numbers, and it has its own implications in terms of considering what kind of investment that will be required. Again, the sector is the regional power sector is dominated by the fossil fuel. Around 60% of generation is actually come from the fossil fuel, despite the recent progresses in the renewable energy. So it continues to be a fossil-dominated regional power system. Of course, the CBD has increased significantly in the recent years. Something like 3 times it has increased, and peak CBD was around 18.7 billion units in the year 2021. And if we take into account the trade that happens outside of the region from the South Asia, then the total trade will be around 24 billion units of trade. But this is very low as compared to, let's say, the other region. Even the ASEAN is around 49 billion units of trade. Of course, Europe is around 240 terawatt hours of trade. So there is a huge scope for enhancing the cross-border power trade. In terms of the climate ambitions, most of the countries has come up with very ambitious climate targets, and the point I want to make is that this energy trade is not only a immediate thing, but it also has a long-term outlook and a long-term vision to it, and that is why we need certain mechanisms where it can be sustained over a long period of time, so that we can achieve these long-term targets. A lot of countries have announced the net zero goals, which also has an impact on how the region will be integrated going in future. In terms of investment needs, yes, as I mentioned, decarbonization goal will require very significant investment. I think around 3.4 trillion climate smart investment is required in South Asia by 2030. I think this is the IFC estimates. Even South Asia would have to spend around 1.3 trillion US dollars to add around 750 gigawatt of electricity generation capacity and possibly around 29 billion US dollars of the planned intergrid connection by 2040. And if we look at the various plans of the South Asian countries, one could expect around 43.8 gigawatt of cross-border interconnection transmission capacities by 2040, currently which is around 4.5 gigawatts. Even the BIMSTEC region will be needing around 1 trillion, investments in generation and around 120 billion in transmission by 2035. So, as a part of our paper, we have defined the regional energy investment projects, which we consider that a project which beneficiary of the project are located in more than one country in the region, or the investment of one country made in energy infrastructure of another country. So this is how we define regional energy projects. Now we also see that a lot of projects is already in existence, and there are a lot of number of new projects are under construction and advanced stage of financial closure and completion. So there is always a trend of increasing regional energy projects in South Asia. In the morning, a lot of issues was discussed about what are the issues related to the cross-border power trade and so on and so forth. I would like to highlight 3 points here. When we talk about regional projects, we have to realize that we are talking about projects which are long-term in nature. While there may be a very immediate and short-term outlook, but these are basically long-term projects that we are talking about. Often the investment decisions that are made in those projects are irreversible in nature. So once you made a decision, it is very difficult to reverse those decisions. So we have to be very careful that what kind of investment framework we are going to design, which kind of addresses of this, maybe some sort of the surprises that comes in the future. And it also has to cater to the multiple jurisdiction, because you have to deal with multiple jurisdiction when you are talking about regional energy projects. And there are a lot of, in fact, the poll itself mentioned that geopolitics is one of the prime challenges, so to speak. So what we consider that we should have an ecosystem approach, a combination of de-risking strategies, risk mitigation instruments, innovating financing instruments, and a regional forum could create that ecosystem-based approach. We could address some of these, issues related to investment. The strategy paper, which was released in the morning, it was basically a follow-on to a report that we published on regional investment framework as a part of the SARI program. And this report clearly tells how the SAFEI should be structured and what kind of modalities of the SAFEI would be. And as a part of this report also, we have also dealt into the international experiences, how some of these regional institutions and forums have actually played a role in facilitating the investments. The video itself talks about why we need an investment forum to accelerate the investment in regional energy projects and promote private sector participation and facilitate affordable investment mobilization, because we have to find finances which are affordable to the region. We talk in the morning that everybody wants the most competitive electricity. So that also can happen when we have affordable finances in the region. It can also address investment-related policy regulatory issues that has the potential to be resolved by creating a conducive ecosystem for investment, supporting sustainability, environmental and social best practices. And of course, we realize that there is the absence of a very focused regional platforms for interaction related to regional energy projects in a very sustained manner. And there is also a lot of information gaps related to the regional energy investments. Very quickly, I will talk about key learnings from the international experiences, and I will focus on 3, because that has been our input to what kind of structure that we have proposed. So in South African Power Pool, we have something called Project Advisory Unit, and its objective is to advance the preparation of selected priority projects in South African Power Pool. It basically conducts regional analytical work, do studies to get the project to a bankable state, and also sometimes use grant funding received by the SAP Coordination Center to select, screen, prepare, and implement regional energy projects. And it also plays an advisory role to the SADC government, which is the umbrella organization in South Africa. So this kind of regional institutional mechanism has been playing a role to promote the regional investment in SAP. And they are also working on developing sub-regional transmission infrastructure financing facilities. We can actually finance some of the regional or the cross-border the transmission projects. And they have plenty of examples how they have been managed to develop certain projects. In Central Asia, it is slightly different in Central Asia, where it is more of a, the forum for discussion and deliberation, but they are very clearly moving towards preparing a regional investment strategies, and then also actually providing practical support to the investors to enhance their business operation in the region. And this is basically about the Central Asian countries which are working on how to mobilize investment in Central Asia. In Europe, we see a very different kind of example where not only they, provide facilitation support, but they actually, help in funding supports. We know some of the cross-border projects are sometimes a little bit risky in terms of, because they have added risk exposure because of the cross-border nature. And here they have something called project of common interest. So the countries come together and decide these are the common projects for the European Union. And these projects gets benefited from the accelerated permitting and procedures and funding. In fact, they can actually take funding from the connecting Euro facilities, which actually provide grant supports to those projects to some sort of, address some of the risks that could have been associated with those regional projects because of regional nature. And in fact, to be a part of the getting the funding support, the project has to be a part of the ENTSO's 10-year network development, but with some sort of a regional transmission master plan as a precondition for getting project to be granted as a sort of PCI projects. So we looked at different kind of examples, and considering the South Asian, overall geopolitical and political scenarios and the way our region is evolving, and you could see that some forums are providing facilitating support, some are actually into the investment funds, some are more about the regional investment strategy, and so on and so forth. So we, taking into all these factors and considering the South Asian scenario, we suggested that the forum, the SAFEI, should be a regional center of excellence for creating an investor-friendly ecosystem for development of sustainable regional energy projects and advancing cross-border trade in South Asia. And its mission is to facilitate, support, and promote regional investment in South Asia in a sustainable and cost-effective manner. And a lot of objective has been laid out. I won't going to read through it, but broadly, if I say that in terms of facilitation, it could develop pipeline of the projects. It could be a matchmaking, all kind of facilitation that could be provided to promote and actually make a regional projects a reality. It could be also project-specific supports as a part of the forum that could be also be considered. It is also going to look at the information aspect. So undertaking cross-cutting research and analysis, commissioning studies on regional energy projects, coming with South Asia regional energy investment outlooks, developing a lot of toolkits. So some of these broad aspects has been covered as a part of the objective of the South Asia Forum on Energy Investment. In terms of membership, we have kept it broad-based. So we feel that any relevant organization that willing to be a part of SAFEI may be allowed to become a forum's member, subject to any administrative requirements such as agreeing to the charter of SAFEI and payment of any membership in the future. Currently, we are not envisaging any membership fee. The SAREP program is going to support the forum, but as and when the forum becomes mature, there could be membership funding, which will make the organization self-sustainable. And these could be national investment bodies, industry association, power utilities, private sector companies, department, ministries, regional, national planning authority, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of a broad-based, the forum to ensure that we have a cross-fertilization of ideas. In terms of institutional structure and secretariat funding, we emphasize a steering committee, and there will be a secretariat which will be supported by 3 working groups, and secretariat will have a secretary, 10 technical officers, finance and administration, and research analysis and consultant. Currently, as I mentioned, SAREP is implementing and institutionalizing the SAFEI. During the initial period, support is providing by the SAREP, but once the operation is stabilized, a self-sustainable option of membership funding is to be explored. In terms of way forward, today we are releasing the report, and then we are looking for identification of the host institution who could be able to partner with us to become the host of the SAFEI. Then we will get into the MOU or agreement with the host partner institution. Then we have already had a draft chapter is ready. We will finalize the draft chapter. then onboarding of the members of SAFEI, then steering committee meetings will be held, then activity implementation will start, then we'll have South Asia Regional Investment Summits, and we're also thinking of international investment delegations to maybe large international financing centers like New York, London, and Singapore. So these are broadly the way forward that we envisage at a current stage. So that's all from my side, and I will encourage to join SAFEI, be a part of SAFEI, and I will be happy to be contacted in any information related to how you can be a part of SAFEI. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rajiv. Thank you so much. Sorry to rush you a bit, but we are kind of a little, delayed in terms of time. So without further ado, I'll quickly move on to our panel discussion. We have, depending on time, we'll take 2 rounds of questions, one which are specific and then one which is broadly common to all the speakers, which will be focusing on the SAFEI. Again, please requesting you to limit your responses to 4 to 5 minutes, and the second one maybe in 2-3 minutes. So with that, let me first turn over to Ujjwal. And Ujjwal, as you heard, there is a huge requirement of investment, as was pointed out earlier in the opening session, as well as in Rajiv's presentation. And increasingly, the fund from public resources is getting scarce. So what, in your perspective, is the role private sector can play in mobilizing finance? And specifically from the perspective of Bhutan, what are the avenues for public-private partnership projects in Bhutan? So if you could talk about that.
Thank you. Audible, right? Thank you, Monali, and thank you for the presentation. It's interesting to see the SAFEI being institutionalized. So I think we would definitely want to very actively engage with SAFEI. I think that's an interesting part. But having said that, in terms of PPP, especially in the energy sector, some of the things, maybe the point of interaction is we do have a PPP policy 2016, and we also have a hydropower policy 2020-2021. I would highly encourage us to have a look at that, and I think I understand we do need to raise up a lot of funding. From the holding and investment company in Bhutan where I work, we are very interested to engage and partner to look at possibilities of financing of projects, whether in the energy sector or the relevant sectors, especially in terms of increasing the demand. And there was a lot of thought process about, of course, energy is so fundamental, but I think we need to also ensure that demand is shown to the investors for investors to put in the money. And I think that becomes a very fundamental parameter in the ecosystem of fundraising. And probably we haven't ever looked at energy from a perspective of being a raw material. We have always looked at energy as a perspective of, it's an output. I need to sell that as a commodity. Maybe it's also time in this forum to start looking at energy more as a raw material, because that gives confidence to the investors. So those are some of the things that we are trying to look at in Bhutan. How to make our PPP model, or how to make our hydropower sustainable investment model more sustainable. The other quick points I want to mention is also we've been very much in deeper discussion with IFC in the recent times. I'm very excited and positive about the 150 megawatt solar project, which would be potentially one of the first PPP partnership with IFC. So that's something I would want to mention. And also looking for interesting, innovative, disruptive ideas in financing and engaging with us as a holding and investment company in Bhutan. So I really reach out on this forum for anybody interested to talk about it within the limits of the policies we have. But of course, policies are also something that that's not written in stone. And if there are opportunities, there will be avenues to see how we can build the policies to be more congenial for investors to be a part of this ecosystem. So probably I'll keep it at this point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ujjwal, for mentioning, very important that energy becomes a raw material to give more confidence to the investors. With that, let me move over to our colleague from Nepal, Mr. Arjun Kumar Gautam, Chief Executive Officer of HIDCL. So, if you could talk a bit about your experience, from the country's experience in arranging finances for some of the very large megawatt-size energy projects, and what were the challenges of mobilizing investments for these such large projects? So if you could talk around that.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your very relevant question for me. Regarding the past experience of the financing in the hydropower project, let me share a few examples which we practice in past regarding the financing in the hydropower project. The first example is, we can take the example of the Silime hydropower project, that, which is the pioneer project of Nepal, which is developed by the local financial resources. And another important thing is that that project encouraged the local people to be a equity holder of the project. So that is a pioneer project for Nepal from the financing perspective. The second is we can take an example of the Upper Tamakosi hydroelectric project of 456 megawatt, which is the biggest hydropower project in operation till date. And that project is the mixing or a blending of the different type of the public funds. Like the government has granted a loan to the project. Similarly, other public funds like the contractual saving organization, employees provident fund, citizen investment trust, insurance companies, and the large corporate investors like the telecom are the major lender of the project. That is another example of the financing modality in the hydropower project of Nepal. The third example, you can take the example of the Upper Arun hydroelectric project, which is the biggest project of Nepal till date, with the capacity of 1,061 megawatt. That is the real blending of the international fund and the local financial resources. And the international fund is led by the World Bank, that is the development partner of Nepal, and the local financing is arranging through the HIDCL. HIDCL is a lead partner, and other bank, financial institution, and the contractual saving organizations are there. So that is another example of the financing in the mega hydropower project. Similarly, you can take another example, that is the government of Nepal has listed 21 government initiative projects under the Janta Ko Jal Vidyut Karyakram. And under this project, the main theme of that project is to encourage the Nepalese citizen to be a owner of the hydropower project. And another theme is that the financing, equity modality of the project is already defined in the equity modality of the project. The government has encouraged to be an equity partner of the different government organizations, including the province government and the local government. And another part, the government has encouraged the local people by assuring the 49% of the total equity to the local people. That is another example of the financing. And the last one is the till date, during the last 3 decades, the IPP project, IPP has developed the around 150 projects, and these are under the consortium of the bank and financial institution, and the Nepalese citizen are the equity partner of the project. And as a result, till that, I think around more than the 2 billion Nepalese people are the active owner of the hydropower project. That is the experience. And regarding the challenges, I would like to highlight few, 2-3 major challenges. The first challenge, as we already discussed, that we have the huge financing gap, that is a financing requirement for the development of the project, and the supply side of the financing capacity. For example, when we talk about the development of the 10,000 megawatt hydropower project, it needs at least the $17 billion. But our financing capacity, total size of the financing system is only the 42 billion capacity, and it is around the 40% of the total financing. It is not possible. So if we assume that the out of the total financing capacity invested in the hydropower sector around 10 to 15%, and then we may have the gap of the 10 to 11 billion US dollars. So that is a great challenge to us. And the second challenge is to as I mentioned that the more than 2 million Nepalese people are the owner of the hydropower project. So another challenge is to assure the expected return on their investment. That is another challenge for the hydropower development and when we talk about the financing in the hydropower. And another challenge is which is faced by the IPP project, particularly the developer of the hydropower project, that is the financing cost. Financing cost of the financing in the hydropower sector is in 2-digit, I think the more than 10, 11 up to the 12. I mean the interest rate is up to the 12, so which is the high interest rate. That is a great challenge to the hydropower development in Nepal. And the last one is the we have the practice of we have the minimal practice of the non-recourse financing. When we talk about the financing, debt financing in the hydropower, any particular project, first of all we seek the collateral or the personal guarantee or the corporate guarantee of the developer. These are the major challenges of the financing in the hydropower sector in Nepal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Wonderfully capturing, giving examples of some of the, PPPs, as well as how, Nepal has gone about it, as well as highlighting the challenges. So with that, let me move on to Ambassador Karim. Ambassador Karim, the question to you is more on the, cross-border and regional energy projects. So as was highlighted in the morning as well as in the presentation, regional energy projects have much more additional risk as compared to traditional projects. So in your opinion, what kind of risk mitigation strategy or instrument you foresee could be adopted for de-risking regional energy projects?
Thank you, moderator. First of all, I am not representing the government of Bangladesh. I'm here in my personal capacity. Sure. But I have been associated with the government for long and continue to have some links. I was asked to step in yesterday late in the afternoon, to step in here and to address the opportunities and challenges for the subject. And in my own mind, I grouped 3 sets of factors. Opportunities are created by the challenges. That's number 1. And addressing it from the Bangladesh perspective, the challenge is for Bangladesh is that having come from where it was to where it is today, it is ranked, I think, among the 6 global economies in terms of GDP growth. That's World Bank statistics of 2019. And its expansion has been 188% since 2009. So that's a huge jump just within the span of these 2 decades. And the demand for energy has plummeted because the growth has increased. So it is a never-ending demand. It's like the tiger which is aroused, it has, tasted flesh and blood, it needs more. Where is it going to come from? And according to our minister's statement given not long ago, I mean, we have a commitment also to try and reduce from the not-so-clean energy sources to clean energy, which was made before the Glasgow summit. After the recent developments, we are having to drastically reorder that. We have to move to clean energy, absolutely. But it needs huge investments. And our minister stated not long ago, we have to double generation to reach 40,000 megawatts by 2030. That's from just a little over 22,000. It will require a huge amount of money for that, the challenges. $80 to 100 billion is required to meet its renewable energy pledge alone. So these are impossible things that we cannot do on our own. This is where the region comes in. We, as a region, are dependent on the region. We cannot grow alone. If we grow, the region will grow. If we go down, the region, maybe I'm sounding pessimistic, the region will also be affected and will pull it down. And in that sense, when I was High Commissioner to India from 2009 to 2014, I tried desperately to get not just the bilateral right, but to use the bilateral to push the region. Because our destinies are all linked together. We will swing or we will swim together. And here I think we undertook a couple of things. My good friend Mr. Shahi was kind to refer to me publicly to say how we started it. From an aversion to importing any energy from India, any power of any sort. That was a mid-2000 narrative. We don't want Hindu power. We started from 250 megawatts, and suddenly it became exponential growth. 250 turned to 500, 500 turned to 1,000. We are now going from beyond 1,000 to 2,000 plus. As I see it, and I enunciated this in an address about 12 or 13 years ago, our future lies in creating for ourselves a symbiotic, interlocking grid of interdependence. We all have power. We have, I don't know how many gigabytes, several hundred gigabytes of latent hydropower. Nepal is one of the biggest repositories. Why hasn't it been able to grow? Because it has to take the power somewhere. Northeast India has a huge repository. Why has no development taking place in Northeast India? It needs somewhere to go, and Bangladesh has to be a key player in that. Similarly, Bhutan, we were at the point of signing a $1 billion investment deal with Bhutan in 2015, and then it fell through. Why? Because we ran into difficulties, and it's been referred to in the survey that you took. The geopolitics and political will. When they come as stumbling blocks, all the good ideas that we put on board, they just go down the tube. So let me come to this forum thing. I think it's an admirable suggestion, and I certainly endorse it. However, I'm very wary, with 55 years of experience in dealing with government matters, I'm very wary of the words association and forums. We tend to transform ourselves into talk shops. We have to find the modalities of how to make these good suggestions, there are no dearth of good suggestions, actionable. And that, I think, will be the main challenge, to get the countries together. So, you know, the forum, why can't we think of transforming the forum into, let's say, a South Asian joint stock company for power generation and distribution? All the partners, because we all need power everywhere. The surplus in clean energy is in the areas I indicated. The demands are in the whole region. Why can't we create something like that, where each country puts in some money where its mouth is, and then let the company. Privatization has not taken easily in this part of the world. You know, for long, energy was a strategic sector the government would jealously and zealously guard it. Reluctantly, they opened it up, and that's how it has grown. Maybe in the terms of regional cross-border trade, we need to have a mechanism there. Forum could perhaps give governments the guidelines of how you arrive at a common spreadsheet of the checkpoints that you have to deal with, a common framework, because the different countries have different regulatory enabling factors and disabling factors. You have to cross that, get a common framework, and then the investment should start going. And once it acts on the profit and loss basis, it will be profit for everyone and a loss for everyone. You don't get into the toxic area where you touch the waters and you burn yourself. So I'll close over here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And yes, thank you, sir, for stepping in for our BIDA nomination participants who unfortunately couldn't get the approval to travel, and greatly so well put about the regional integration. I mean, USAID has also been working in the regional energy space, and the challenges and the slow change in the mentality, as well as how the stakeholders see, has been tremendous. And point on the forum, duly noted, so hopefully we will be able to come up with frameworks which help facilitate these investments. So I'll come back to you more on the forum subsequently, but let me, with that, go quickly over to our private sector participants, specifically with Ambassador Sir's remark. Maybe first I'll go to Deepak sir. Sir, again, the question is more related to, how do you see if there is a playing field for private sector to operate in a cross-border power trade space, and what role would you like to see in policy and regulatory environment to give confidence to the private sector? So again, from the regional energy perspective. Not working? Can someone help with the mic?
Thank you. I was busy in my mic, so I couldn't fully get the question. But what I understand, that when we are talking about the region, South Asia region, there is, especially in transmission, there is no level playing field. Similarly, free power, premium, etc., is an issue for the private sector to move in. Tariff is also an issue. One important thing which I wanted to highlight, especially after our Godda experience, where we did a power plant in Godda, that is Jharkhand, Bihar, and directly a line which was built up to Bangladesh, and 800 megawatt has started flowing. That cross-border policy about integration, including standard contracts with focus on building transmission lines by private sector, is very, very essential according to me. Because we look at things in standalone, generation is standalone, transmission someone else's responsibility, like whether NEA here or the power grid there or power grid Bangladesh in Bangladesh. It doesn't work like that, and especially when you are talking about big things. So the whole ecosystem has to be understood, and the challenge has to be given to the private sector, and private sector is competent enough to do not only generation but also transmission, because without that it doesn't make sense. So you have to depend upon other agencies, when they are going to do, when their financial closure takes place. Just for the record, because in one of the first lines which was built up, I mean, I'm going back to my earlier role in PTC, when Ambassador was talking about, see, Muzaffarpur-Dhalkebar line, that was thought by ILFS in 2002, 3, 4. They went around the world for the financial closure. It didn't happen. So in 2010-11, as PTC, we did a power purchase agreement, meaning thereby, if the transmission line is built up, we took the risk that, okay, whether buyer we find out or not find out, transmission prices we will be paying. And then the financial closure of Muzaffarpur-Dhalkebar line took place. What I mean to say, if a generation is being put up, let's say if we are going to put up a large generation in any of the basins, we will like not only to put up the generation, but the integrated transmission line also. And same thing is going to happen when India is going to look east from connectivity. Obviously, today Myanmar is in a difficult thing, but without connectivity through them, and the demand center of Myanmar is not near India. It's 200, 300 kilometers deep into jungles. So when a generation, whether of Nepal or of Bhutan or of India, is thinking of selling electricity over a period of time to those areas, the generation and transmission both have to be seen together in the ecosystem, and then only things are going to happen. That's what I want to share.
Thank you so much, sir. No, those are valuable words. I'll move on to Nitin. So Nitin, you have, at least India has come up with these very supportive guidelines and regulations to support cross-border power trade. So there is clearly a thrust and a policy towards moving, enhancing trade in the region. Yet, it's not happened the way it was expected to. So, maybe you can point 3 actions that can help expedite it, and also talk in context of the how do you mobilize more investments from the private sector?
All right. So thanks, Monali. And so there are 2 parts to the question. I'm just trying to address the first part. And taking cognizance of the time, we are already over the time. So on the performance so far of whatever cross-border trade has happened, I think at the fundamental level, base level, things are done. It's just that you have to reinforce. For example, the basic pillar is the transmission infrastructure, so which do exist. It's just that now it has to catch up with the expected requirement of the market. You know, it cannot happen that the market volume should be restricted to the network. Of course, it's a catch-22 situation, but again, you know, that thought has to start flowing in. It is already there. I'm just saying, so all these points are there. It just, you have to reinforce. The second point is around the, what we have done so far. We have harmonized the regulations. The regulations are in place. Trading is taking place. But the important part is still the approval process is very cumbersome. You know, now is the time as we move into the next phase of integration. It's important that we have the, these things, the clearances part at least, taken care. And the third and the most important point is still the market is restricted to specific segment, not getting into technicalities. So the access to all available products in the market should be provided to the cross-border entities. I think that's one thing. Otherwise, multilateral transaction, we have been talking about, we would see a lot of some positive development in that sense. And to the second point, just quickly, I'm sure we might be circulating the finding of this session and you might get details, but just to quickly, if I can share 3-4 pointers around on the investment part. So private investor would be keen, provided there are certain assurances, comforts given around, and this have been discussed in the morning also, is on the stability around the regulatory and the policy environment. I think that's one. Second is the political commitment and stability. So investors do look for a trend of the political commitment that has happened in the past. Everybody wants the project to be self-sustainable. However, financial support incentive in the initial phase of a project plays a very important role. And there's, Victoria would also second that point, that now that the investor and the lender community is actually looking for projects which have some commitment towards the ESG. I think that's something which has to get into the DNA of any project developer, be in India or outside India, or maybe any cross-border country. The fact that ESG compliances, ESG commitments does play an important role if you go to the market for fetching investment. And maybe the project management, robust systems in place, I think that goes without saying. So that's in a nutshell, I feel, on the investment side of it. Thanks.
No, thanks. All very important points. So with that, I'll move on to our last speaker, at least for the first round, Victoria. Victoria, from the perspective of a multilateral agency, what do you think are the role of multilateral agencies as well as private sector, since IFC works very closely with them in mobilizing finance for such large, megawatt-size regional energy projects?
Great, thank you very much, Monali, for that question. And I think some of my points have already been answered by other members of the panel. So IFC, as I'm sure a lot of you know, is part of the World Bank Group, and multilaterals play a very key role, obviously, on the investment side. So that's the first point. World Bank providing finance to governments, and IFC, like other DFIs, we provide finance to private sector players. And in doing that, across the globe, we get a lot of experience on what works in different markets, what we can leverage, and lessons learned that we may be able to carry from one market to another. So that enables to us provide support to our private sector developer partners, as well as on the government side, on the policy side, to really help projects move along. And to find solutions to some of the sort of nutty challenges that we face, particularly in nascent markets. I think particularly in the context of Nepal, where we have been involved in some very frontier projects, we have found, along the way, we found solutions to bankability issues, which ultimately, if you want to have a really vibrant and developed market for the private sector, those issues are going to need to be more standardized. So we need to address some of the key issues in relation to the power purchase agreement, which we've talked a little bit about today. Also in the context of the commitment of the government, the regulatory and policy framework. And in that context, our World Bank colleagues have worked very closely along with our inputs as well from the IFC side. And I think this is a key role that the multilateral can play in working with the power secretaries and the round tables in the region to really try and open up some of these policy and regulatory dialogues. They're not easy issues to address. There's a lot of geopolitics. but there has been significant advance even in the few years that I've been working in the region on power, on energy. So I think it's a very positive message that we can send. You know, there's more to be done, but there's a lot that's been done, I think. And multilaterals can certainly play a role in that. Another point I wanted to pick up is standard setting, and Nitin alluded to that in relation to ESG issues. But we have worked very closely with private developers here in Nepal to really build up the capacity on environment and safeguards and also on governance. And these are really crucial issues, obviously, particularly in the hydropower sector, where there are some significant challenges that are faced on the environment and safeguards side. And those policy issues go beyond that. So as I said, you know, we can leverage off where we've been working in other markets to really build up regional power trading mechanisms. And we've got a lot of experience within our institution and other multilaterals also. I think there was also reference in the presentation on the work of USAID that, you know, we can learn from some of the challenges and experiences of working across jurisdictions. In some places where you're dealing with very different legal systems. Here in South Asia, you have the advantage that it's a very similar legal system across the board, so you're not dealing with the problems that, say, West Africa have, where they've got common law and civil law jurisdictions trying to work things out together. So we can bring significant lessons learned from that and really try and capture those. We can also leverage development partners, and I think this is a crucial piece that we need to take into account, particularly where we're trying to create a level playing field, how we can bring in sources of blended finance to bring down the cost of some of the investments. So working very closely with all development partners to try and achieve that. And then I think the other key point is that local partners, and it's amazing the local developers here, I think that we've been working with for decades in some cases, really bold, really willing to take risk. We've been really trying to help them bring down those risks, but they can also leverage off experience from regional and global players. And so another role that we have been playing is introducing local partners to strategic investors from outside the region or within the region. So there's just a few things that I wanted to capture. Also just a quick plug for my unit. So I cover upstream and advisory work. So we provide support to private developers to de-risk projects. So we come in at an early stage. We also work very closely with our colleagues on the World Bank side and with regulators on policy issues. So it would be great to interact with you if you want to hear more. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Victoria. We have roughly around 18 minutes left. So what we'll do is 10 minutes we have to keep for if there are any questions on the poll, as well as 5 minutes for the chair to give his concluding remarks. So 1 minute each. If you could quickly talk about, what do you see value of such a facilitation forum such as SAFEI, and what would be your top recommendation to make it a regional center of excellence? So we can go this way and start with Victoria.
Okay, thanks very much. So I think already with the great work that has been done by the World Bank and others, by IFC, on really trying to bring together discussions and policy dialogue, that I think it demonstrates that this sort of a forum is very useful. My recommendation is that we try and make sure we don't operate in silos. So let's bring all of the different resources together to make it, to really make it coherent and to make a difference. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just to quickly cover, so it's congratulations for the initiative and also the charter being laid out. And if I can just quickly figure out two things, if you can deliver that would be very helpful. Is the first point around the investment information dashboard, portal, whatever you call it. So there is a readily available information, and I think this initiative has to become the voice of the investor. That's how it should be seen as, not merely a facilitating agency. And also the fact that there has to be a robust monitoring and evaluation of whatever exercise initiative that this function does. And also there has to be a feedback loop. You know, it cannot, the charter cannot be laid down for, let's say, 3 years and we don't review that. I think it should be a continuous feedback loop should be there. And that's a couple of points from my side.
Great.
So.
Thank you. Already most of the things have been covered. I'll just say that there should be a fast track mechanism, working out a fast track mechanism to resolve the problem with PPA and the project finance. So that is one area which you should also look at. How do you bring out that fast track mechanism? Second thing is that you have to continuously work with the regulators, the tariff which we have already discussed, that this type of royalty plus this thing, not only here, but in other countries also. Not I'm talking about Nepal. It is not going to work out. So open access. Now open access should be across the region. I mean, it should be. So industrial consumers can also draw, and they are good pay masters. If discoms can't pay, then someone else is willing to pay. Let them pay, and that will benefit that country also. So you have to look at this thing and create your own framework. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is a very innovative and the constructive idea to promote the common interest of all the investors in the sector in this region. Thank you.
I'll move on to you.
Thank you. I think, as Sir mentioned, admirable platform, and happy to engage. A couple of thoughts very quickly. The first is power and energy is very legacy systems, and there is a lot of geopolitics, as we know. So I think those are some of the risk frameworks that we need to look at. So when I talk about that, I also want to talk about shareholders' expectations and interest. Who is going to be here? How are we going to map that? How are we going to address that? I think that's important. Financing portfolio, I think it should not, my thoughts are very, very raw at this point, but my thoughts are it should not just be probably generations, the interconnections, cross-border interconnections, how do we facilitate investments in those might bring in a lot of interest from the geopolitical side, and also that is what makes the grid whole. So I think those are other parts to look at. Storage, R&D, innovation in this portfolio is important, especially to lure in the younger generation into this platform. I think that's what is more important. The last point I thought that's very important, and maybe a little bit of a cliche, but at the same time, if you look at innovation and disruption that's happening, whether you look at, identity space, whole world, whether it's North America or Europe, we're very busy working on regulations for a centralized platform. And suddenly, but very quickly and silently, the decentralized platform is coming. And everybody is now looking at regulations for decentralized platform on identity. It's very similar here, whether it's energy, interconnections, policy, project management, regulations, whatever we talk about. I think, so that's why I am very wary of how quickly disruption can creep in, whether it's the age, gender, the policymakers are going to change, and this is a long haul that we're looking at. So I think we have to give a very close look at what's happening in the disruption space in terms of tech, in terms of energy markets, and also in terms of policy and regulations. Probably I'll stop with that. Thank you.
Thanks. Over to you, sir.
I don't really have much to add except to emphasize the point which I just mentioned in passing. Why have we not succeeded in cross-border trades? We've been trying desperately, okay? We have succeeded in the bilateral level, but we have not been able to transcend from the bilateral to the regional or sub-regional level. Our grids are connected bilaterally, India, Nepal, Bhutan, India, Bangladesh, India. Why are we not able to connect these three bilaterals into one quadrilateral? And that is where the toxicity of the domestic politics and the regional, affecting the regional politics comes in. In the Bhutan case, it was a question of the modalities of transfer. And at the same time, when we were negotiating the Bhutan deal, we were also negotiating with India, generating hydropower in Northeast India, take it through Bangladesh to India, basically to Jharkhand and other areas which are starved. One dropped, the other also dropped. It was a tit-for-tat thing. Now we are on the verge of, and I've been hearing it for some time, and I'm getting a little tired of this. We are on the verge of having electricity power transmission taking from Nepal to. The most exciting thing that could happen. It's stuck because of financing. this is where perhaps the international donors like the World Bank and ADB and others who can come in, because their money doesn't have a national flag. Okay. Bilaterally, you can raise different flags and say, no, that's the red flag, I cannot accept that source of financing. So maybe they can step in where other hurdles come in terms of the politics. And I'll leave that question out.
Thank you so much. And a lot of valuable suggestions we have received from all our eminent panel members. USAID will be taking forward the institutionalization of SAFEI through our SAREP program. We will be touching base with all of you and also with the audience. If anyone is interested to join SAFEI, please connect with Hari or myself or Rajiv, all of us, or Namrata, who is also here. All of us are on the app. We can be easily located on the app. So with that, I am going to hand over to our MC back for the poll and the questions, audience questions.
Thank you very much to our moderator, to our session chair, to our presenters and panelists for another power-packed session here at the Power Summit 2023. We would now like to head towards the poll first. So if you haven't yet had the opportunity to look at the app, we'd highly recommend you do so, because we have two very good questions for the poll. The first one being, which of the following possess the highest risk towards investment mobilization in Nepal? There were some discussions made during the panel as well. There are 4 options for you that you can choose. And the second question is, what will be Nepal's installed power generation capacity by 2027? We'd love to see how hopeful or realistic you would be in this particular question. So please do cast in your votes and please do participate in this particular poll. There are 2 questions. We're giving 10-15 seconds more so that everybody can cast in their vote. We've put in a lot of effort in terms of developing this particular app so that there could be good interactions during the session as well. So we definitely hope that all our participants can cast in their vote. Very, very simple. You can have a look at the Power Summit app. And we also have some questions.
Yes, I can, if once the poll is over, I'll do the question and hand it over to the chair.
Sure. So I think we'd now like to close the poll. So can we have the outcome of the poll as well? All right. Which of the following possess the highest risk towards investment mobilization in Nepal? The majority feel like it's project development challenges or the ease of doing business, followed by lack of market, followed by lack of domestic capital or resources, and the last being forex and hedging risks. We'd like to now move forward to the other poll that was out. What will be Nepal's installed power generation capacity by 2027? And a majority of you have voted for 5,000 to 6,000 megawatt, followed by 5,000 megawatt, followed by 6,000 to 7,000 megawatt. And there are few people who are hopeful that it will be greater than 7,500 megawatt. Thank you to our lovely audience and participants for participating in this poll as well. May I please hand it back to the moderator for a quick round of Q&A.
Thank you so much. We have 2 questions. Maybe we can do one of them. And both the questions are for Rajiv. So please connect with Rajiv for the question which we don't take up. So Rajiv, what kind of studies have been done by SAFEI to protect and promote investors on energy sector from exchanges rate risk?
Hello. Okay, so currently under SAFEI, we have not conducted any study as such. But when I was referring to the previous study, which was on the regional investment framework, which actually gave the idea of creating this forum, there we have looked at the issues of the the currency-related aspects in quite a detail, and we had done the the SWOT analysis of each of the countries. So I would recommend that because time is short, there are ways how we can manage the currency risks for a cross-border power projects. So I would recommend that people should go through that report, and I'll be happy to also share those reports.
Thank you, Rajiv. This question was by Mr. Yambaral. Please connect with Rajiv. And the other question which we are not taken up, Jaideep Singh ji, please also connect with Rajiv. Before I hand it over to our chairperson, please join me in giving a round of applause to our very eminent panel members. And with that, let me hand it over back to our chair for his final concluding remarks and then for closing the session.
Thank you, moderator, and thank you, great distinguished audience, for a very effective poll and subsequently Q&A session as well. Thank you, eminent panelists. You know, it was a great sort of takeaway for me as leading fast-track agency handling large investment critical projects. What I earlier also mentioned, we are in good path, but yes, as very rightly said, things should not limit to talks and proceeding reports. We have to somehow be able to frame detailed action plan framework, and the advocism can only be quashed, or uncertainties and unpredictabilities is something that investor would never want. So anything that has to be done to nullify advocism and ensure that earliest realization of project takes place. Earliest means the reasonable time that is required for project to be well studied. There is some reasonable time the lenders who are also investors or finance got to get time to do proper due diligence. Earlier with Monali, when I was talking to you, I was happy hearing that you'd be supporting some good noble institution with, appraisal framework and templates. So capacity development is very important, but whose capacity are we developing? Those actors, prominent actors within the regional energy investment ecosystem, who all are those actors? What sort of, capacity needs are there within those institutions? Whether those institutions are capable of absorbing the knowledge that we are imparting, and not just absorb, but preserve those knowledge. What it takes for that institution is permanency of that institution. So Office of the Investment Board is doing its best to see that it becomes financially and HR sustainable. So on that, I, as an CEO, member secretary to the board, I'm doing best of deliberation, and board is there to support me. And board, I have commitment of the board that we will strengthen, make this institution robust, so as, because we will only handle handful of projects of big scale, of strategic importance. And when we say strategic importance, I forgot to mention, we do have projects in our pipeline for which we have done agreement. One good project, which is in construction regime with substantial progress. Another genuine developer is trying best to reach out to have tri-nation market interconnections with, proper, well said by eminent panelists here, the back-to-back arrangements are very important. So that would for sure qualify as a regional project, energy project. So region should integrate. Intergovernmental mechanisms should chart out, clarity in terms of, how best we can enhance trading mechanism. What products are we just going to stick to the day-ahead, energy market, or are we venturing for something more? Because project of strategic importance need to have market assurance. And the bankers, the lenders are going to say the project is bankable only very time, the nature of tie-up between buyer and seller is having some sort of, comfort for lender to place. So we at IBN, we do best to see that, we de-risk project. So earlier what I was saying was this associated infrastructure, be it evacuation corridor or cross-border transmission line, or even the regulatory commission is working hard in terms of devising, transmission pricing and wheeling charges, because not all project can afford to carry the cost of associated infrastructure within project cost elements. So there it may work as an operational expenses for them, operating expenses for them. So that's how we try to incentivize. But now coming back to the very feedback we have had from our eminent panelists is, no doubt forums are required, but with the very spirit that this forum be an forum for exchange of knowledge, ideas, the good practices that are done, or somewhere even a forum to demonstrate the success stories, or even the lesson learned we have from the failures of solicitations, failures of contracts, failures of project, upon a prudent evaluation conducted for those respective projects. I again say, credibility is very important for institutions like IBN or any other investment promotion agency, or even USAID's Noble Venture through SAFEI, whatever we are trying to do. I think let's chart out those actions, and under each actions, if there are activities wherein the parties involved would have to work, can be committed. But IBN's move ahead in 4 strategic pillar approach. The 4th pillar is coordination, collaboration, and partnership. So I think diplomatically I have said we are ready to partner, but we want to come along with our valued, genuine potential investors also have an access to that forum, because there will be noble suggestion and feedback that we will be receiving from them on the problems they have faced within different regimes, study regime, negotiation regime, contract till the very time the bankable contracts were chopped, the difficulties they have had in securing financing agreement or financing closure, you may be clarity on narrative of financial closure, or even ensuring how best got to value the polling results also. How effective have we been in facilitating the project during construction regime? So project development is multidisciplinary. I would say I have to thank our partner agency, all these ministries whom IBN work with. We have our coordination mechanism in place. We have follow-up mechanism in place. We have reporting mechanism in place. And earlier I mentioned we have best used some simple management tool. Investors come along with their realistic implementation schedule, and to that schedule, we try to tie up with facilitation schedule. So facilitation work plan is there. The 7 district, chief district officers, they know for what they are accountable, what has to be done, by when, so as the project is realized before a stipulated time frame. So that's the approach we have moved ahead. Challenges are many, but there are ways to overcome those challenges. Solution can be designed. All eminent people, not within the panel discussion that we are participating, but in the audience also, please, I request you all to come forward. IBN is very soon running a discourse on blended finance. We want to see how blended finance work in public window is one part, but for private window, we have to see how best we can really devise policy and relevant legal and regulatory arrangement for blended finance to be institutionalized and operationalized, and if it can be really be workable modality for incentivizing projects. MDPs and global finance, these green projects should have an access, private sector should have an access to long-term concessional finance wherein to cover cost. I am little hesitate to say, but Nepal's ecosystem over the period of time, bank and financial institutions capacity went on increasing, but at this point of time there is little surge. I would not say crisis, but there is tightness of liquidity, and we have seen, the bankability of the bank in terms of, honoring the claim for drawdown is at time, been difficulties the investors have been facing. So this is high time we got to chart out which projects are for dedicated export proposition, which are for domestic, which are mixed, and in regard to long-term tie-ups arrangement that we have, and uniformity of understanding of project is very much important very moment the project is structured, and social acceptance. And we should be able to nullify or minimize all the foreseen risk. Unforeseen risk we will manage then and there, but foreseen risk we should try to minimize the very moment we decide to move ahead with the project. So as you know, investors are comfortable. I guess we're done with the time. So, but I think on evacuation arrangement, a lot of good things are happening. Cross-border transmission line, I guess timelines also can be easily given on respect to few of the projects. And IBN has been trying to not just have a crowding effect on one basin only with the project. We have diversified ourselves. Some domestic proposition PROR projects are of also equal importance. There is a Korean developer developing UT1 where 9 credible lenders are involved. That project is also very important because that will enhance credibility of this market and institution, and will boost the confidence of the lenders to finance for other projects which are in pipeline. In West, in Karnali, there is Upper Karnali project which is working for financial closure and vis-a-vis back-to-back arrangement to the potential market. And there is project in the West SAFEI Basin, which has also for which development rights, study rights has already been awarded to one of the potential investors. So we are in good directions, but capacity is very much important. But we have to be very specific in what sort of knowledge is real needed right now. So overall, what I say is it was a very good session and good takeaway. Thank you, moderator, for helping me also set context and managing the overall session. And thank you, very distinguished audience, for the perseverance you have had. With this, I declare the closure of this session. And IPAN, thank you once again. And IBN is happy to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our chair, to our moderator, and to our panelists. This panel was able to raise some crucial questions and highlight some important aspects when it comes to cross-border trading and how cooperation is key when we move forward to the power market as well. I'd like to now invite on stage to distribute the token of appreciation Mr. Anand Chowdhury, Treasurer of IPAN, and we'd like to thank our session chair, Mr. Sushil Bhatta, CEO of Investment Board of Nepal, for setting the tone and for beautifully concluding the session as well. Can we have a big round of applause for all our chair, moderator, and our panelists? We'd also like to thank our moderator, Ms. Monali Zia Hazra, Regional and Clean Energy Specialist, USAID. We'd also like to thank Mr. Rajiv Ratna Panda, Power Market Specialist, USAID's SAREP. We'd also like to thank our panelists for their valuable input and insight in this session. Mr. Arjun Kumar Gautam, Chief Executive Officer, Hydroelectricity Investment and Development Company Limited. We'd also like to thank Mr. Ujjwal Deep Dahal, CEO of Druk Holding and Investments Limited. We'd also like to extend our gratitude to Mr. Tariq A. Karim, Director, Center for BF Bengal Studies, Independent University, Bangladesh. We'd also like to thank Ms. Victoria Delman, Upstream and Advisory Manager, Infrastructure IFC. And we'd also like to thank Mr. Nitin Sabiki, Head Strategy and Markets, Renew Power Limited, India. We'd like to request all our dignitaries on the dais to kindly take a group photograph. Mr. Amitabh has already gotten his token of love for the first session as well, and we'd like to thank him without the token this time, but thank you for your valuable input, sir, in this session as well.
Welcome to Power Summit 2023.